All right, it is that time. I get to introduce our speaker, and I'm so excited this morning to introduce Kelli Atterbury. Her husband is Pastor Doug, and for those of you guys who don't know who Pastor Doug is, he oversees the all of the kids' men stuff, and he oversees Abide, which Abide is for parents like me, who, if you have high school kids, this is the perfect marriage ministry. So once you graduate from Thrive, you get to move on up into Pastor Doug's ministry, which is Abide. Kelli helps out with a ton of the family ministries here at church, and she also teaches, and she has two beautiful girls, and they love spending time at the beach, and I'm super excited to hear from her. She is just one of those women who, she has come alongside me many times when I started teaching for Awanas. She took time out of her schedule and met with me and followed up with me, and it just showed me that she cares and she's passionate about what she does. So please give a nice warm welcome to Kelli.
Well, I have two girls, 9 and 11 now. And I say this every phase, like, this is my favorite phase, I love it, but this is my favorite phase. I love it. It's amazing. We don't have car seats anymore and strollers. And I'll be honest, there's a little bit of grief letting that go. I now don't have a minivan. I drive a normal car that I can park without hitting the curb. And my girls sit in the front seat and we have conversations. It's a totally different thing and I'm loving it. And it just dawned on me the other day that I've got 3.5 years until my oldest is in driver's ed, which is crazy. And I realize that 3.5 years is still a good chunk away, which I'm happy about because I'm not totally sure that I'm pumped about teaching her to drive. That sounds terrifying to me, and probably because I remember what I was like when I was a teenage driver, and it didn't go well all the time. But in my defense, I lived in the mountains when I was a teenager, so driving was just a beast. I had to drive down the hills, what we would call it, and I used to do that when I was a teenager, like 18, 19 years old. I'd drive by myself down these mountain roads, and my parents would let me go as long as I had my little spiral notebook with me. My spiral notebook had directions, how to get down the hill, how to get to Target, how to get to my friend's house, and how to get home, and all in the right order so that I wouldn't get lost. I mean, who needs GPS, right? There was no GPS. I had no GPS. My flip phone didn't have anything to help me, and I have zero sense of internal direction. So this little spiral notebook was my life, and I'm sure you're shocked to know that every time I would drive by myself, I would end up parked against the curb somewhere and calling my dad. Help. I don't know where I am. You have to, help me through this. One time I called him and I was like, Dad, I'm lost. I need your help. And he gave me really solid advice. He said, okay, look out your window, look for the mountain and head that way. And I was like, Dad, I'm not lying to you. Out of 3 different areas, I'm looking, there's mountains everywhere. Which one? Where do I go? And he's like, well, head east. All right, that helps. No compass, no GPS. That's not in my notebook. I don't know how to do that. So eventually, I just picked a direction I thought was east. Sure enough, it was not east, and I ended up against the side of the road again, calling him, crying, just come get me, okay? I'm going to stay right here. You come get me, and then I will follow you the whole way home, and I won't get lost anymore. Okay, sound good? And sure enough, he would come get me and lead me home, and we'd get there. He was a patient man. Eventually, I learned how to get myself home all by myself, but it was a process, a long one. And as silly as it might sound, when I think about parenting, I'm talking the whole picture, the big picture, the whole gamut of parenting, from bringing your baby home from the hospital to potty training to driver's ed, the whole bit. It actually kind of reminds me of what my dad did for me. It's our job to navigate this for our kids, isn't it? We are the ones to teach them, to give them directions, to lead them ourselves. That's the goal. And I think if we want to do a good job of this, it really has to start square one with just how we think about parenting in general. Maybe that sounds really overly basic, but to me it's helpful just to think of my job as a parent to really embrace that role. I am the direction giver. I'm the navigator. I'm the leader. I'm the one who's going to bring my kids to adulthood with my words, with my example. It's my job to lovingly lead them every day of their life. And that's how I want to write it for our first point. If we want to be a good mom, I think we need to provide loving leadership. Provide loving leadership for our kids. We all know that kids need leadership. just in general. We all know this. If you drop your keys on the ground and your toddler's nearby, at some point you're probably going to have to tell him not to shove them into the outlet, right? Or there's going to be things that they do that will harm them. We have to help them. We have to lead them and teach them, even little things along the way. And even though my girls are older, I'm still surprised how if I take my eyes off them for just a little bit, they can find themselves in life-altering situations. The other day, I had a house full of girls. There's like 13 girls in my house, and I rounded the corner into my living room just in time to see one of my daughter's friends hanging on really tight to the railings of my stairs, halfway up in rollerblades. And I was like, no. Get down. We don't go upstairs in rollerblades. You could die, like it's just, and she looks at me like, man, like just always out to ruin the fun, And my job is not just to ruin her fun. That's not why I have rules like that. Just like the reason you don't let your toddler shove the keys into the outlet. We have rules that are for their good, right? And typically our kids will push back against our rules because they don't understand that they're for their good. And ultimately, the reason is selfishness. They want what they want, and they want to do it without interference from you. Thank you so much, right? We see it in all of our kids, selfishness. And this morning, I want to take a minute and just kind of flip that around just for a second. We know as moms, we've got to find the selfishness, we've got to fix it in our kids, but how often do we think about our own lives and really take a look at ourselves and ask, is there any selfishness in my life that I need to find, to point it out? It can be harder to see it in ourselves, but I think it's just as important that we do, because selfishness can hurt not just us, but these kids that we're called to lovingly lead. And the opposite of selfishness is sacrifice, isn't it? I think every day we need to ask ourselves, what am I doing to sacrifice for my kids? I need to choose every day to lay my life down for my kids, for their good, for their benefit. And this might come more naturally at first. None of us is just really hopes we can wake up 5 times a night, I'm sure. But we all do it when we have infants, right? We have to do it. None of us says, man, I really hope that I can just sop up puddles on the bathroom floor every day this week. But we all do it when we potty train, and we do it with a smile, don't we? Because we want to encourage our kids to keep going. There are so many ways that we practically lay ourselves down and sacrifice for our kids with our time, with our energy, with our lives. And that has to keep going all the way to the end of parenting, to the finish line. We really want to keep sacrificing, keep loving our kids that way and do it for their good. It's going to be a mindset. It's going to be a commitment. We want to keep at this. And it's going to look different as they get older. Maybe it means sacrificing a little me time or just a little bit of time just to sit and catch up on a show or do something, but you sacrifice it in order to help your kid with their fractions, whatever it might look like. I think if your mind is made up that the goal of your parenting is truly to provide loving leadership for your kids, that this is a whole life commitment, not just your words, but the way you live, you embrace this role as a mom to lovingly lead, then you could see every little sacrifice that you make for your kids as a step in the right direction, down the right path. And this is really where your example comes in. This is your whole life. You want to be an example for your kids, not just at the things you say, but what you do. My girls are old enough now to see my example and pinpoint and point out my inconsistencies, which has been a really fun change. The other day, they picked out desserts, and they're so funny. They each pick different things, and then they each want to try a bite of their sister's, but neither of them really wants to give up a bite of their own for their sister. So it begins, And I have to intervene and be like, stop it, knock it off. Share one bite with your sister, you'll live, do it. And they share, and it's fine. And a while ago, my husband came in, and he asked me, hey, where's that dessert that we were going to share? And I was like, oh, I ate it. I ate all of it. And my youngest gasped, like, you didn't share with Daddy? I mean, just the injustice that I would make her give a bite, and then I would hork down all of Daddy's dessert. Well, that was a beautiful moment that could have been a really good teaching example that I missed because I was not aware of my own selfishness. I wanted what I wanted, and that was that. I think our example is a much more powerful tool than we realize. It really is. They listen to the words we say, and they also watch the way we live. So we've got to do both. We do have to use our words to inform our kids' view of what is wrong and what is right. Like rollerblading on the stairs or shoving the keys in the outlet, they're not just going to get that naturally. They need to hear you say, this is wrong, this is right, here are the rules. And then you can back that up and make it crystal clear for them in the way that you live by your example. If you want Junior to share, then don't hog all dad's dessert, right? It's a thing that we can do for them to help it be clear. And we're not always going to do this perfectly. Like me, I'm sure you're going to have moments where your example isn't perfect. But the goal really would be to paint a very clear picture with our words and our actions so that they know exactly what's expected and how to do what's right. And if we're going to do that, I think there needs to be no ambiguity in the rules. If it's wrong today, it's going to be wrong tomorrow, it's going to be wrong in 100 years. But where do we start? Where do these rules come from? How do we know which rules to implement in our house? Like, where do we even begin? And obviously, some houses have different rules. Even within a household, there can be different rules. My sister is 10 years younger than I am, and when I would come home on the weekends to see my family, when I was 19, she was bent out of shape that she had to go to bed at 8:30 as a 9-year-old. We were sisters. How unjust. And my mom had to tell her that the rules were different because she was in second grade. In the same way, I'm sure that if your 4-year-old has to go to bed at 7:30 and he looks at you and says, that's not fair, you and daddy stay up later than that, you're not going to say, you're right, son. I also will go to bed at 7:30. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And we know that there are things that are going to fluctuate and be different in our rules, even in our own household, things like chores and bedtime and so on. You're not going to have your kindergartner do 3 hours of homework like your high schooler. It's just going to be the case that it's different. But there are some rules that are going to be the same for everyone in the house, from the toddler to the teenager, even to mom and dad. And those are the ones I'm talking about. Those are the rules that don't fluctuate, they don't change, they are set standards. We expect them to be kept, and we keep them ourselves. And I want to write it this way for our second point. I think it's really helpful as moms if we will commit to a common standard. Commit to a common standard in our home. My girls like to watch Mark Rober. I did not know who this guy was. Apparently he works for NASA, and now he does science experimenty things for kids on YouTube. And they found this channel of him doing these weird experiments, and one of them was he made this little box machine that exploded glitter and foul-smelling spray, and he put it in an Amazon box. He made a bunch of them, and then put them out as bait for people to steal. It's great entertainment if you have not seen this. But there was one that really surprised me. I hadn't seen this one before. It was a mom talking to her daughter, I think her daughter was like 12, something like that, about how to steal the package, how not to get caught, not knowing that this little box was recording everything she said. And there's, the video of just the dark part of the box, and you could hear mom talking to her daughter. And then the daughter at one point just said, oh, this feels good. And it got kind of quiet, and you could hear the mom kind of pause, and she must have felt kind of icky by that statement. And then so the mom clarified, what feels good? Stealing? And she's like, well, yeah. And the mom kind of went into mom mode. She goes, don't say that. Don't talk like that. Just do it. Just interesting to me that this mom is telling her daughter not to feel good about the thing that she's teaching her to do. Deep down instinctively, she must have known that it was wrong. Clearly, a rule in her house wasn't don't steal. Stealing's fine, so why should she feel guilty if her daughter was happy to do whatever she's doing? Well, again, different moms have different rules, right? If one mom says you can rollerblade on the stairs, and one mom says you have to take your shoes off before you come in, and one mom says it's fine, and one mom says you can steal. We all know that there's something different about stealing. There's something different about the moral rules deep down. And I think we all know that. We can see that there's something different between what's wrong and right versus who takes their shoes off before they come in the house. If you spend any time on social media or reading books or whatever, there are a million experts on parenting in the world, and they're, of course, all right, and they're, of course, all confident, and they are, in fact, the experts. And so when you're looking for someone to help inform you on what should be the moral rules in my house, where do you even start? especially when some of these loud voices that are talking about the way it should be in parenting are often contradicting each other. Who gets to make the wrong and right rules? Why do we trust this is right? I think that's a really good question that we need to ask ourselves as moms when it comes to the rules in our house. Question our kids are great at asking. Why? Why do I have this rule? Why do I trust it's right? Why is it in place? If your parenting methods or the rules you put in your home are based on something you read or something you found online, are they subject to change? Let me ask it this way. Let's say you have a mom on Instagram or a blog or whatever, and she's just awesome. She's always done up, she's pretty, her living room's clean, her kids are great, and every day she gives you this like little life-giving tip on parenting, and you just love this lady. And for a year, you watch her and you live by these words and you're encouraged by her positivity, and then you find out that of her 3 kids, 2 are in juvenile hall and the last just got suspended from school for violence in elementary school. What would happen to everything you learned from her and everything you thought was right? I would imagine there'd be some credibility loss there. So obviously no parent's perfect, no kid is perfect, and we actually really do need practical tips. We need encouragement from other moms. I get that. We all need that. But when it comes to the right and the wrong, that clear path, that direction we're going, that direction that we want our kids to go, that we are going ourselves, the right and wrong, who decides that? And how do you know that the rules that you're putting in your house are timeless, they won't lose their credibility, that they come from a reliable source? How do you know? Well, there's no better authority on all things moral and good than the best character and virtue that there could possibly be, and that is God himself. God is the best source of these rules because he is perfectly holy. And if that's the case, then the best common curriculum, the best moral standard that I could ever instill into my home is what he says, his word, the Bible. Unlike so many parenting gurus or experts you'll read or things you find online, I know that God's word can be trusted. I know it can be. From cover to cover, it can inform my mind of what is actually morally excellent and what that looks like because I know the Bible is true. And if it's true for me, then it's also true for my kids. It becomes this perfect common standard. This is the thing that remains constant and consistent in my home all the way to the end. And the reason why I know that I can trust the Bible as that common standard is because I know the author is perfect. Unlike any other author at any time in human history, the author of the Bible has never failed morally in any way. He's perfectly holy, meaning that he is at full capacity for moral excellence with no room for growth or improvement. He has arrived, so to speak. He's never made a mistake. He's never had a moral failure. He's never had any moment in his behavior that he regrets, and he never will. In a word, he's perfect. Talk about wanting to have just the right person to help you decide which rules are wrong and right in your home. Far from the joke that parenting doesn't come with an instruction manual, we actually do have help to navigate what is right and what is wrong with our kids in our home if we're willing to search it out in the Bible. We can read the Bible for ourselves, we can teach it to our kids, and what I love is that we will never plumb the depths of the wisdom of this book. We just won't. Are you going to open your Bible and find the perfect time to start sleep training your toddler? Nope. Are you going to open your Bible and find tips and tricks on how to get them to eat their green peas? Nope. But what the Bible will give you is something so much more important. It is the instruction manual, so to speak, on the big question, the one that we should be asking, the one that really matters, and that's why. Why should I act this way? What is wrong? What is right? How do I know this is right? If we do what God sets out for us in the Bible, we're not going to become perfect ourselves, but his word will give us the perfect way, the good, the right way, the right and the wrong that we can teach our kids and we can be sure about. There are some quick fixes, I don't know if you want to call it 10 steps, whatever, on Instagram. There's all kinds of parenting advice that I've seen that's just like, just do this, and then you could just coast the rest of the way. If you just get this right when your kids are little, then they will be thriving, successful adults, and you can just, take your foot off the gas. If only that was true, right? Deep down, I think we all know that parenting is something that we're in for the long haul. It's going to take endurance. We're going to have to keep going. We're going to have to not give up. We're going to have to keep coming back to that common standard. We're going to have to keep at it. We're going to have to keep encouraging our kids and correcting our kids all the way to the finish line of adulthood. I think we all want to do that well, which is why I want to write it this way for our third point. We need to offer correction and encouragement to our kids. Offer correction and encouragement. As moms, we want to communicate to our kids that following what God's rules say that we've applied to our home, that's actually really for their good. It brings happiness and life and peace when these rules are kept. My girls are watching and reading the books for the Little House series that I used to watch when I was a kid, The Little House on the Prairie, and it's been fun because I remember reading them when I was a kid, and they have these little moral stories all through them, and this one that we just read last week was so fun. The main character has her 2 nephews come stay, and as the nephews are dropping off, their parents are dropping them off, the advice given to them is, please don't be negative with our boys. We don't believe in the word no, and we don't believe in discipline. Have a good week. And it was meant to be this comical thing, watching these boys just wreak havoc on the house, and they ruined all their relationships, and they learned all their lessons the hard way. And, we're laughing at it, but it's kind of the same principle I'm trying to communicate here, where when we teach our kids to obey the rules that we've set in place, these rules we get from God's word, it really is for their good. It's for their good because there are good consequences and bad consequences, and we want them to make the choices that are good and right. Nobody just gets to do whatever they want. That's not real life. We know that. We want to help our kids really make good choices. And we want to make sure that we reinforce the positive choices they make, to cheer them on when they obey, to not miss an opportunity to do that, to help them see the goodness that is bound up in doing what is right. We can do that by giving them rewards. We can do that by affirming them with our words. Maybe at times even giving them a treat. We don't do it all the time, but it is nice to bless our kids every once in a while, just to affirm the progress they're making in the right direction, to show that you see their obedience and that you are proud of it, they're happy for it. Your words will help them choose what is right. It's going to reinforce that for them. And as they get older, we've got to keep doing that, keep looking for ways to encourage them, keep helping them along, even little ways. My girls have to make their beds every morning when they wake up. It's just a task they absolutely hate, but they do it. And now they do it without being told. And every once in a while, I purpose to go in their room and make a comment to them about how pretty their room looks and how decorated it is. And I love how tidy your room is done. Your bed is so pretty. And you should see my little one's face just light up. Thank you. And you know what happens? She makes her bed the next day. As moms, we never want our kids to feel like they cannot please us. And that happens when we focus in on all the things they're not doing and all the things they could be better at, and we harp on that. And we never give them any encouragement for what they are doing well and how they do please us and how we are happy for them to be making good choices. We need to encourage them, cheer them on, help them see the good that is bound up in doing what's good. And at the same time, we can't neglect the flip side, which isn't as much fun, but to offer correction and encouragement when they need it as well. If we want to direct them in the right way, we're going to have to provide that for them with correction. Some of my favorite parenting advice came from a woman named Elizabeth Elliot, and she said that every time she disciplined her daughter, she would say, "This was your choice." That's an interesting way to say it. This discipline was her choice. And she said, "You could have chosen to obey, but instead you chose to disobey, and therefore you have chosen this consequence." And I started implementing that with my girls, even when they were little, when they were toddlers. And it is so interesting to watch the little wheels spin. I could see my little one at 2 years old about to touch something and to kind of pause and think, I can choose to touch this, but then I choose the timeout, right? You can see it. We've got to help our kids choose what is right. And part of the way we do that is by offering appropriate consequences at the right time so that they can see that there are consequences in good directions and bad directions. And we've got to keep at it. We've got to see this task of encouragement and correction as being permanent all the way to the finish line when they are adults, because your toddler is going to need that, your teenager is going to need that, your young adult is going to need that. And that's why it's so important to keep coming back to that common standard for the timeless truths that you are implementing into your home, for the rules of what is good and right, so that you can do this all the way to adulthood. The goal would be to refer to the common standard yourself and to teach your kids to do it as well. Eventually, they can refer to the Bible, to this common standard that you have for these moral right and wrongs, and they can make decisions and weigh their own actions against it themselves. I'm reading the story of Joseph right now in the Bible with my girls. Joseph, if you're unfamiliar with the story, was a man who was totally mistreated by his brothers. I mean, betrayed in the worst possible way, and ended up becoming one of the most important viziers in Egyptian history. The story ends with Joseph forgiving his brothers, hugging them, and telling them that he forgave them, despite the evil that they had done to him. We've been reading this for a week, and the other day we were driving home in the car, and my girls were arguing in the back seat. And here's the thing, when they argue in the car, they always do it in a whisper, because for some reason they're still convinced that I can't hear them from the front seat. So they were whispering with each other and arguing in the car, and then I told them that their punishment was to not speak, no words till we get home. We get in the house, I set my stuff down in the kitchen, and I round the corner just in time to see them hugging each other, and I could hear them asking each other to forgive each other without my prompting, without me having to say anything. And it was just a sweet moment because it dawned on me all week. We've been reading this story from the Bible about a brother who forgave his brothers. And now, when my girls are fighting with their sibling, they instinctively knew what they should do before the consequence that I was about to lay on them came to them. They could make the decision for themselves. And that's encouraging because it shows that our kids really can get it. They can learn it. They can use even the common standard of the Bible to make their decisions if we will help them do it. We do it for ourselves. We help them do it for themselves. And eventually, they can refer to that standard on their own without your help. It's encouraging because it can be done. That's how we lovingly lead them, is to lead them to the standard, lead them to the Bible, help them see it. About 5 years ago, I drove up to Lake Arrowhead for women's retreat. And women's retreat was less than a mile from my house where I lived. So it was kind of strange driving back up. I drove by myself. And you'll be very proud of me. I found it all by myself. I knew every street. I drove the whole way up. I didn't have any anxious feelings. I just got there so well. My dad would be so proud of me. And you know what? It's so funny because it's been more than 20 years and I can still hear my dad's voice in my head. Here's the part of the road where you shift down. That's the landmark you're looking for. That's where you turn. And it took a long time for me to get there. And now I'm right on the cusp of about to teach my own girls how to do the same thing. Granted, it'll be a little easier since they don't live in the mountains, but I'm going to have to teach them. Look for this landmark. Here's where you turn. Call me when you need me. You can follow me. I will lead you there myself. Isn't that the picture of what we're doing in parenting? We've got to be all in. We've got to be willing to lovingly lead our kids the whole way there, and we do it by following that common standard that God has graciously given us. We know we can trust his word because he's the one who wrote it, and he's perfect. And we can just keep at it. We never can give up. And that's why I love groups like this, because we really do have camaraderie. We have each other. We can spur each other on. We can help each other. And ultimately, the goal is to get our kids to the finish line of adulthood to where they can do this themselves. They can decide what is right and wrong based on what they have read in the standard for themselves. And that would be my desire, and I pray that it would be something that we're all successful at as we do this together as moms. Thank you for letting me join you this morning, and I hope you guys have a great time in groups. You're dismissed.